Welcome to the Food Startups Podcast.
Hey, and welcome to the Food Startups Podcast, episode number 23. This is your host, Danny. My co-host, Matt Aaron, is out this week. I was out last week. We're hustling really hard this year. I was in the States. I was visiting some family because it was my dad's 60th birthday. And I was also checking in with a few potential buyers, learning more about some industries, some niche industries in the United States. Things seem to change so much in the States these days around food for some really important reasons, like the push towards healthier diets, the push away from non-GMOs, that, maybe it's kind of crazy to me, but almost every single visit, it looks to me like the United States is a different place, is a different landscape. There's always something new. And I know that the food industry has typically been about new, but it's always been about new in terms of ingredient innovation away from health. Now it seems like it's more about stripping away non-transparencies. It also seems like, the most prized things around food these days are things that are simpler and more natural, and also markets that are educating successfully around superfoods, around gluten and having gluten-free foods, around what people really consume that should make them feel good and should also be healthy. So it's been really cool being back in the States for a little while. And Matt's there right now. Matt's also visiting with some family and working on some deals. And so, I'm going to be excited talking with him for the next few months about what's going on in the States and, how balance between Colombia and the U.S., how that time is so important because of the state of things. Now, today, I want to introduce a special guest that we have. He's actually an entrepreneur that works as well on the sourcing and importing side in a special crop, a special food that's growing in popularity quite a bit in the United States in the past 5-10 years, the coconut. Coconuts have been around forever. But coconut oil in the 1970s was considered an oil that was high in saturated fat and therefore bad for the heart. And therefore, the coconut was sort of stigmatized, or coconut oil was. And our guest doesn't work in coconut oil specifically, but works in a niche product and works in a niche company for coconut chips. So we're going to get to hear about the industry, about how he manages the United States and Asian relationships. Okay, so without further ado, I have a very special guest here, Vincent Kitirattragarn, founder of Dang Foods. Vincent, welcome to the Food Startups Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Excellent. You've got a great product that I've had the opportunity to try recently. Can you tell our audience a little bit about what are Dang coconut chips?
Sure. So coconut chips are made from the meat of the coconut. It's also called copra. And it's the white fleshy part when you crack open a coconut. So it's not the coconut water. It's actually the stuff that's pressed to make coconut oil. So it's very nutritious. We basically slice it out of the coconut, cut it into small slices, and then soak it in a syrup for a few days, and then toast it at a long time at a low temperature so it becomes crispy. And the result is a chip. It's a coconut chip. So it's got salty, sweet, and also savory notes.
Wow, fascinating. How did you come up with the idea? Have coconut chips been something you've been eating your entire life, or tell me a little bit more about that?
So I was cooking on the side. I had a full-time job as a sustainability researcher. And I used to cook for fun on the side at these markets in San Francisco. And at these markets, you could just cook at home and bring it to this public market and sell to the public. So it's a really easy, low overhead way to get into the food business. And my mom caught wind of it and sent me this recipe that she used to have as a kid. And it had toasted coconut in it. It was a lettuce wrap recipe called mian kam. It's a Thai dish. And one of the ingredients is toasted coconut. So when I made it, I was toasting the coconut and then the flavor filled up the room, and I smelled it, and I tasted it, and I thought it was great on its own. I'd never seen anything like it as a snack in the U.S. And so, immediately I called my brother up, and he was in Thailand at the time, and so he found something similar that they had on the market out there. And then we got in touch with their manufacturers to see if they wanted to sell to us in our packaging to sell to the U.S. So that's kind of a little bit about how we got started.
Wow, that sounds amazing, actually. So it was something that turned from a hobby into a business that it is today. And so you didn't have any previous experience in the food business at all?
Not really. I had worked in a couple restaurants. I knew I had an interest in food for ever since I was a kid. I never really knew what that would look like, though, as I grew up. I thought about doing food trucks, and I thought about trying to start a restaurant. But honestly, all that seems like a ton of work. So, one thing led to another, and I started playing around with these recipes, and then before you know it, we have this small snack company. And it turned out to be quite serendipitous because my family we have experience importing stuff from Thailand to the U.S. for the past 20 or 30 years. My dad has a candle company. So having that family connection is super helpful.
Definitely. And so has your brother worked with you since the start?
Not since the start. So at the time he was working as an accountant, and it didn't take long for him to realize, hey, this is a lot more interesting than accounting. And so pretty soon after things started getting bigger, I asked him to join him. Now he's our director of operations.
Wow, amazing. And so have you spent a lot of time in Thailand as a result? Have you just found a really awesome manufacturer? That sounds like really complicated stuff. Exporting and then really branding a product is not easy.
It requires a lot of face-to-face to get to know the supplier and establish the trust. So I was just there 2 weeks ago. I go there probably twice a year, and I try to visit all our suppliers every time we go back there just to make sure that, they know that we're on top of things, and, just to improve the relationships. So one huge thing in the food industry is, having those relationships. And whenever you have a chance to get in front of somebody, somebody important, I think it's a good idea too.
Is the business culture in Thailand quite different than the business culture in the United States?
It's a little bit different, yeah. So in the U.S., you can trust that people will pay you in 30 days. In Thailand, there's not quite as much trust.
Definitely. So it takes a while to build relationships because of the fact that there are different customs, right?
Yes, exactly.
Matt, my podcast host, and I, we definitely feel the same way as far as the culture is different in Colombia. Yeah, exactly. 30 days is not 30 days at all. Things take a while to get off the ground. We've often talked about how there are expressions that really reflect what the culture is like. For example, using the term ahorita means like ahora, which is now, but it also is a term to say, hey, like, I'll do this later, don't press me, which can often mean I'll never do this in Colombian culture. So really fascinating. Okay, cool. So really cool. And you found a manufacturer in Thailand, and you had some experience importing. So what were the next steps? And what were kind of, I feel like every single food company has a lot of trouble early on because you have a new product and there are a lot of questions that are unanswered, especially if you're new to the industry. So what were kind of some of the challenges and then the first big breaks you had, if you don't mind sharing?
Sure. So as far as challenges, it's really nice at the beginning because usually it's very clear what you need to do. It's pretty simple when you break it down. You get a nice product, you create the packaging, you create the story behind it and get a logo and get a brand going. And then you basically create marketing materials and then go find the right people to get in front of. And so the very first challenge was to figure out, where to go to meet all these people. And that just takes, talking to as many people as possible. So taking people out to lunch, whoever will talk to you. It's just really good to be able to establish that. And then how to divide your time. So I think, once you figure that out, it's just a matter of being pretty aggressive when you have something special that they should have, that they should taste. So at our very first show, we had a tiny little 2-foot table and a huge booth, right? But we had people standing out in the aisles saying, hey, have you had a coconut chip before? Come try one. Because we were so aggressive, getting in front of people, it led to a couple of our first big breaks, which are our first big account. Like we landed a Whole Foods region at that very first show. We landed a big chain in Texas. at that very first show also. I would just say that if you know what you're doing and if you know exactly what you need to get out of it, then it's a lot easier to plan strategically.
Excellent, excellent. Did you have a business plan when you started out? Because it sounds really orderly the way that you say it, but I know that in my experiences starting a company in the cacao industry, it's been really, really tough. It's been tough to know and how to figure out, especially if you're working in a new product niche or a new industry niche, what exactly you're looking for, you know? So,
for us, I mean, the business plan was basically get out there and get out there as fast as possible before somebody else gets wind of this idea and try to get in the space. Like establish ourselves as the Red Bull of energy drinks, you know, or the Red Bull of coconut chips rather, because, you know, Red Bull is synonymous with energy drinks. So we're still following that initial strategy. And, you know, we had kind of the bare bones of a business plan, but once you start getting into the nitty-gritty, the business plan kind of, you know, gets pushed aside and you start to focus on one thing at a time. We had a business plan, but I wouldn't say we stuck with it.
Excellent. Cool. And so you went to your first trade show, or your second trade show. Were you already in stores? What can you tell some of the folks out there who are venturing into the food startup phase as to how to actually get into the market and get some data points for who their customers are and where they belong on shelves?
Yeah, so I think the first thing to do would be to test it, right? Once you have a product and you've made a few hundred of them, you know, find a way to test it at your local store. If they'd be willing to have you come in and do a demo or a sample. That way you'll get feedback from actual customers and see if they'll actually buy it. Because, you know, you can always think that you have a nice product, but you don't know until you test it. So we did a few events before we did our first trade show, just to get feedback from people to see, you know, if it's the right kind of price or where they think it should go in the store, so that we could bring those stories with us and tell buyers later on.
Cool. And would you I remember when I first tried Dan coconut chips that I was thinking, man, these are amazing. They're so tasty, and I can really eat a lot of these. But then I also thought for a second, somewhere in the back of my mind, are these healthy? Are these in the potato chip section of a Whole Food store? Am I going to find these next to raisins and other things? What have you found as far as figuring out who your customer is and also educating them? How'd you decide on your marketing strategy in other ways?
As far as placement in the store, we like to be in a few areas. First off is the produce area. If you can find yourself next to fresh fruits and vegetables, it's really nice because everybody walks through that area. We also like the healthy snack area, which would be dried fruits and nuts. So we do not like to be in the candy section. We do not like to be in the salty snack section, which is where all the potato chips are, because we have a relatively small bag. And so, that's, seemingly a minor detail, just the size of your bag compared to theirs. But you'll be able to tell, even just looking at the numbers from the store, whether you're in a good place or not. And placement means everything. It's worth it to say no to a decent, what you think is a decent offer, if it's not the right place in the store, because you probably won't last for very long there. And as far as figuring out who actually buys our stuff, going to events and shows and doing sampling, you'll get a good idea of, who's open to tasting something with the coconut chip. And for us, we figured out that it's basically people who know the health benefits of coconut. So who drink coconut water, coconut oil, they're much more likely to see coconut chip and say, oh, that's probably decent for me. And so we do play up the health benefits, the fact that it's vegan and gluten-free, and the fact that coconut chips have all the health benefits of coconut oil. So there have been studies that are coming out that show that coconut oil, the HDLs in it, are better for your heart than originally thought.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And so it's definitely been, I've seen the rise of the coconut oil industry, and so that's definitely because of the fact that you're using the same copra, right, that is transformed into coconut oil that has a really high oil content. You're able to kind of perhaps ride that wave.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we hear all the time that coconut is on trend. It's one of the growing trends. Coconut water just blew up over the past decade. So, we're happy to ride along the tailcoats of that trend.
Excellent. And so, I know after a little bit of traction, what are your guys' goals right now in the next year or 2 years? How are you planning on growing and expanding to become a larger company?
So originally we focused on the natural channel and the West Coast, and now we're focusing also on the Eastern and Central regions. So we recently hired a couple of sales managers to take care of our expansion plans out there. We're launching 3 new flavors this summer. So we're doing a lightly salted, unsweetened version, a dark chocolate coated coconut chip, and a Greek yogurt coated coconut chip. And so we're really excited about those. And they all come with the same, with their own challenges. For example, chocolate, it melts at high temperatures, so we have to figure out how we're going to transport it all around the country without it melting all over, inside the bag. So
definitely,
that's kind of what we're focusing on. Yeah.
That's cool. And you guys have been able to grow and strategize, forecast this growth with your own capital, or what are some of the tough things inside of the company that you've had to deal with as far as just growing? Every single company in the food industry, when you start getting national distribution, it's not going to be easy unless you have really good distributors.
Figuring out who those distributors are. I mean, we've had to say no to opportunities because they might have asked for, a potential partner might have asked for an exclusive here or there, or it just wasn't the right time, or it basically pigeonholed us down a path that maybe wasn't the best in the long run. So we're always careful about exclusives. As far as growth capital, we did start with our own savings and family and friends loans, and continue to do that as such for the past 2 years. So one thing that really helped is having nice payment terms. So it's something that you don't really think about when you're starting out, but if you can negotiate really good payment terms with your suppliers, that's effectively like having a really good loan right there, because it gives you that extra time to receive after you ship something. So that's one thing that we've always had since the beginning that's been super helpful. It's really good payment terms. Making sure that the inventory is, in and out. It's not sitting there, because if it's sitting there, then basically it's just cash sitting there. So, having a really good idea about forecasting, which is one of our biggest challenges, because, when you're growing, you might not be able to accurately forecast the need and demand over the next 2 months. So you just do the best you can.
Awesome. So that's really interesting. It's interesting to hear you say about, to hear you mention payment terms, because I hear about payment terms often when you get into a regional supermarket or a national supermarket, that they pay you 60 days out, 90 days out. How did you get that leverage, if you don't mind my asking? Were you always insistent when you negotiated at first to really get solid payment terms, or what exactly went down?
So, when you are figuring out with your suppliers, you kind of have some leverage because they're looking to get your business, right? So, basically stating up front that that's a prerequisite for working with you is you can do that at the beginning. When you're working with distributors, it's a little bit different because you don't have much leverage. You're trying to get their business. Yeah, we've been trying to get good payment terms from distributors hasn't been proven to be as easy as it is when you're the one buying stuff.
Okay, I got you. And in that climate in Thailand, which is a little bit more difficult, though, it must have taken a little bit of time. But now maybe you guys are growing, or what changed, or maybe was it like that from the start, that you always had good payment terms from the start?
Well, that's where having family in Thailand helps out a lot, because they can speak.
Definitely. Cool. And listen, so I noticed you guys are located in Berkeley, which is kind of this melting pot of food culture where a lot of the big ideas in food have come out of in the past decade or 2 decades to influence the rest of the United States. So what are your big ambitions for Dang, and where do you see your food segment of coconut chips going in the future years?
I mean, at this point, it's a matter of becoming a national brand and trying to, get into people's awareness. So still, there's a lot of the country that doesn't know what a coconut chip is. And that's one of our biggest challenges, is educating people, trying to get everyone in the U.S. to learn what a coconut chip is. And so we have a marketing team that goes out there, goes to events, does samplings. They're pretty active on social media, trying to raise awareness, basically, of coconut chips. I think that's our first, most immediate goal. But then midterm and long term, looking to help out with with different supply chain certifications. So we're looking at fair trade right now for coconut, which doesn't exist in Thailand. We got non-GMO verified for our key current items just a couple months ago. And so these kind of certifications help out when you're trying to differentiate yourself to a customer like Whole Foods, because they see two items and one of them's organic, they're probably going to take that one. We're just staying a step ahead of the competition so we could. And we also want to introduce other product lines down the road. So it's not going to stop coconut chips, but we see ourselves as kind of a bridge between the U.S. and Asia as far as healthy snacks, really good tasting snacks. And so that's kind of our niche right there. Trying to make sure that we can bring over the best stuff from Asia, and get your customers excited behind it due to our branding and our marketing efforts.
Very cool, very cool. And just for our audience, if I just have one more follow-up question for you, Vincent. So, what would you say is your number one marketing focus amongst the ones that you listed through the education process? If you're trying to educate, what is the biggest way you can do it, maybe with the budget that you have or with the resources that you have at your company?
Yeah, and there's no easy answer to that. I think part of any big product launch for a new, never-before-seen item is going to be in-store sampling, because the closer you are to your product, the better your marketing dollars are going to be spent, because the more likely it is for somebody to pick up one of your bags. So, selling them via the New York Times is not going to result in people going out to stores and buying it, right? That $50,000 ad might get in front of millions of people, but they don't know how to buy your stuff, they're not going to. So, it's been told to me, like, if you're better off taping $1 to your bag rather than giving it to somebody else, then you should just do that. And then, every circle, as far as distance away from your bag, is going to result in less and less sales. So, spending your marketing dollars where the bags are. Do it through promos, put your stuff on sale all the time. Pretty much everyone in the industry has promos 3 or 4 times a year, and try to get those placements, those big displays at the front of the store, because that's really what's going to help you grow your audience.
Excellent, excellent. Well, Vincent, thank you so much. It's been awesome listening to you, learning about Dang coconut chips, and we're excited to share this with our readers. So thanks a lot.
Thanks so much for listening, and as always, if you have any questions or comments, find us online at foodstartupspodcast.com.